Ahoy spirit enthusiasts, in this video I'll be sharing my full tour of Angels Envy Distillery. They are currently one of my favorite bourbons that I drink. Enjoy! So unfortunately in this portion of the distillery the audio was quite bad, but they do talk a lot about the family, legacy, and history, so make sure you Google Lincoln and Wes Henderson. They are the creators and founders of Angels Envy. And here, very important, he discusses the 7 rules of bourbon. A, that it must be made in the US, not strictly Kentucky. B, that you must use brand new charred oak barrels. C, that the mash bill must have a minimum of 51% corn. D, that it must be distilled no higher than 160 proof. E, that it must be barreled no higher than 125 proof. F, that it must be bottled no less than 80 proof. And G, that no additives must be added to the bourbon.
A grain wheel, and a grain wheel is a visual representation of our mash bill. A mash bill being a breakdown of what grains go inside the whiskey. So legally for bourbon, we do have to meet that 51% corn mark. But here at Angels Envy, we are Angels. On the last word of that. We are 73% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malted barley. We source our corn from one county over, Shelby County, Kentucky, from Dissapointed farms. We've got pretty much everything he produces in a year. But rye and barley do not grow so well around there. They prefer a much more temperate climate. So we source those from the Dakotas and southern Canada. We're going to take each of these grains individually and we'll send them through that black box I was talking about outside. Inside that black box is a machine that looks like this. We call this the hammer mill, and it's basically a giant rotor with a bunch of steel hammers sitting on it, and it'll spool up to high RPMs. We'll dump grain into the top, and we'll pulverize that grain into roughly a cornstarch or a cornmeal consistency. So not quite down to a powder, but just almost there. Once we hit that point, we will pump air through the bottom of our hammer mill, and it will actually bring these grains down this access chute behind us into what we call the mash cooker. So we start with 21,000 pounds of corn, we mill it down, and it needs 10,000 gallons of water in there at 210 degrees. This begins to cook or hydrolyze the corn, as we say, breaking the starches in it down into simple sugars like maltose, glucose, dextrose, and sucrose. That gets a couple hours on its own, and then we drop our temperature down to 170 in order to add in the rye. We do this because rye is a very fickle grain. If you add it in too hot, it wants to stick together and clump up. If it clumps up and makes dough balls in your mash cooker, you've ruined the whole process. You cannot ferment dough balls, so you got to start all over. We definitely don't want that, so we get under 170, add in the rye, and give it a couple hours to cook together. And then last but not least, we'll add in our malted barley. And even though it is the smallest portion here, the barley has the largest overall contribution to the mash cook due to the fact that it's malted, which means we get it wet and it starts to sprout, and then we dry it out and stop that sprouting process. This creates an enzyme called amylase. And amylase is a pro at turning starch into sugar, which is the whole point of the mash cook. So we get under 150 so we don't destroy that enzyme, add in our malted barley, give it a couple hours to all cook together. Total cook time here is about 6 to 8 hours, and what you're left with is called mash, the beginning stages of whiskey. Next we want to add yeast to ferment that mash into alcohol, but there is a big problem. Our yeast will die off at temperatures really over about 100 degrees, when our mash right now is about 150. So in order to combat that, we send our mash downstairs right over this type that you can drink. So this whole process takes just shy of 3 days, about 70 hours. And when it's done, all these bubbles will stop, it will thicken up, and it'll more or less become stagnant. At this point, we call it distiller's beer. So you do have to make beer before you make whiskey, but this is no beer that anybody would want to drink, but the truthfully beer you even could drink. It's going to be about 19 proof or 9.5% alcohol, but roughly the consistency of bread pudding. So you're going to have to chew it up and swallow it. You wouldn't be able to just drink it. And while it would give you a buzz, I don't think it's going to be fun for anybody trying to get there. And if that's not enough to deter you guys, this stuff is not flavored. It can't be. So it's going to taste like molten bread the whole way down.
Ooh.
It's usually about 120 degrees in this room. This is still so I usually just bait whoever's in here. But it feels fantastic in here today. Alright, y'all, so behind me here, you've got a 35-foot tall, 28-inch in diameter copper hollow still. And this still will be fed by that beer well. There's a pipe in the back here like beer. The beer comes into the still, and in each of the places here up front, you see a circle. Represents what they call a beer plate on the inside, a big circular plate that's got about thumb-sized holes poked all the way through it, and they act as a buffer so our beer doesn't plummet from the top straight to the bottom of the still. It has to hit all 15 beer plates and slowly trickle down. Now, as this is happening, we're going to exploit the differences in boiling points of water and ethanol. Water boils at 212, ethanol boils at 173.1. But water will produce steam long before 212. So we're going to heat water up to 180 degrees. We're going to take that 180 degree steam and pump it up the bottom of the still as the beer falls down. Now, because that steam's higher than the boiling point of ethanol, it will vaporize most of the alcohol in that distiller's beer and carry it up to the top of the still in the form of a gas. There it's collected by a pipe that we call a condenser. Essentially a pipe on the inside that holds that alcohol vapor, and one on the outside that constantly flushes it with cold water, cooling or condensing it back into a liquid. At this point, we've created a 128 proof low wine. But we're not done there. We can go up to 160 proof coming off our still, and we can go as pure as we can get. So we send our low wine downstairs, directly below me here, to a 375-gallon pot still, or what we call a dumpling. And it works in a very similar fashion, but no steam is used this time. It uses a radiant style heat to make out any excess water vapor. You get us from 128 proof low wine to 138 proof high wine. Our new make, White Dog, Moonshine, Hillbilly Love Juice, the original Mountain Dew. Y'all can really take your pick on this thing. This stuff really does have balance. But this is about as close as you can get to bourbon without legally being able to call it that. It's 138 proof, so it's too high to be barreled, and it's never seen the inside of the barrel. But it's a good way to show you guys that all 100% of your color is coming from there. Along with about 60% of your flavor normally. We're a finished bourbon company though, and we use 2 barrels, so about 80% of our flavor comes from that. But we're going to do something cool with this. Say you guys were walking out in the woods behind your house one day and you found just a random still out there running. You didn't know where it came from or what was in it, so you were afraid of it. Well, first off, good on you, don't ever drink random distillate unless you know the person making it. Drinking this stuff's a great way to go blind, both temporarily and permanently, but we won't get into that. But if you could get some of this on your hands, you'd have a good idea of what they were making. If I pour ours into my hands and rub them together and smell them, it smells like corn. That's our majority grain. But if I continue to rub my hands until they start to dry out and smell again, it gets really spicy like clove or nutmeg, and that is your rye, your spice, or flavor grain. And then if you continue to rub until your hands are completely dry and take one last smell, everything gets nutty like toasted almonds or walnuts, and that's your malted barley. So even if you had no clue what was happening and sat still, if you could get some of this distillate on your hands, you'd have a pretty good idea of whether or not they're making whiskey. That's 100 years. And this hydrometer here is now our tax collector, so we're not paying some guy to do it. But the Hendersons love the idea of a spirit safe, so they have Bendome Copper and Brassworks make this one custom for us with our angel wings and bottle on it. And Bendome's a very special company in our world. Not only do they make the spirit safe, they make all of the machinery out there and both of our stills. And we're only 2 places in the world to get stills of this size and quality. The other place is over in Scotland, but lucky for us, and especially our pockets here in Angels Envy, Bendome is about 4.5 blocks of that range. So our shipping and handling costs were literally nothing compared to what they could have been. But at this point, guys, we've created a 138 proof high wine. We're going to head downstairs so I can show you guys what we got to do to barrel it, and eventually how we turn it into Angels Envy. So right this way, go. Bottom of the column still, what I really want to talk about is this leftover distiller's beer that's coming down those last couple beer plates. We call that stuff stillage, and it's got 2 uses. First use, we take a small portion that we call backset, and it goes into our next mash cook. Kind of like they do sourdough bread, a little bit of the old and the new. This does make us a sour mash whiskey company, and it gives us a balanced pH and a consistent flavor profile from cook to cook. For the rest of the Alright, y'all, welcome to the barrel fill room. This is the first place in the entire distillery have to add to that spirit to get below that limit of 125. We prove it as close to that as we can go without accidentally going over. We proved down to 124.7. Once we get that magic number, these tanks will be this machine here. This is a barrel fill machine. We'll roll the barrel up to it, press a couple buttons, and it'll put 53 gallons worth of now bourbon into these barrels. Then an operator will come over here, grab this rubber hammer and one of these copper bungs, and they will hammer the bung into the bung, sealing the keel. They use a copper bung, and it's properly buried for a split. So once it gets wet with whiskey, it swells up, and then it cannot come out of that hole until you drill it out. This is how they keep dirt and break from getting in, and whiskey from getting out to move the barrels around. We then take those barrels, roll them back around this truck here, and that truck will take them about an hour north to Henry County, Kentucky. We're going to go sit and think about what they did. We're near that amount because for every year they spend aging, we lose 3 to 5% of the inside volume of that container due to evaporation. They call this the angel share, and as the story goes, it evaporates and it goes up to heaven to be with the angels. There's nothing we can do about it. This has plagued whiskey makers for hundreds of years, and we've all just kind of learned how to deal with it. 3 to 5% doesn't sound like a whole lot at first, but over the course of 6 years, that could be 30% of our barrel. That's a lot of yield gone. But we're going to take whatever is left in those barrels, load them up onto these troughs here, we'll drill out the copper bung, and we'll dump the barrels out. This does two things. It gets the whiskey out of the barrel, but it also gets all the barrel char, all the burnt pieces of wood, out of the whiskey. There are steel screens at the bottom of those, and they'll filter out most of the big stuff, but they will not get everything. So we do filter one other type of way through this machine over here. That machine forces our bourbon at high pressure. The screen is made of diatomaceous earth and activated carbon, and this will filter out any of the small floating particulate that is left. After that, most places are going to proof down bottle and sell to you guys because that is how you make bourbon. But here at Angels Envy, we're going to take everything one step further. We like to revere tradition, but also embrace progress. So we go back to a barrel fill machine. This time we're not going to fill new charred white oak barrels. This time we're going to fill used ruby port wine barrels from the Douro Valley of Portugal, like these red stain barrels you guys may be able to see back here. These barrels all held a fortified dessert style port wine with floral and citrus notes and hints of plum and cherry. And we're going to take our bourbon, put them into those barrels, and sit them back here for 4 to 6 months. We call this the secondary maturation or the finishing process, and it is our specialty here at Angels Envy.
So I was able to confirm with the tour guide that the new rum barrels that they use are no longer plantation. They're Bacardi Reserva 8 years, which is quite interesting.